So this bridge, the Albion River Bridge, has created a bit of a war between the state of California and the people who live in this area. This war between California and the locals, it's been going on north of 20 years or so. Now this bridge is about 2 hours north of where I live, and if I'm being fully honest, I had no idea that any of this was going on, and I stumbled upon this controversy on the old internet. And I am not a journalist, and I am not going to try and tell you a news story about this, but this is a fascinating bridge. It is a piece of California history. It's a piece of history that may not be here that much longer, and I really wanted to come see it and stand below it and share it with you guys because I think it's so beautiful, and it's really kind of an interesting story what's going on here in Albion. So let's start with a little bit of history on this bridge. This bridge was built in 1944, and it's a timber bridge, and it was built with wood because it was World War II, and steel and concrete, well, they were in short supply, and they really needed to build this bridge. Why did they need to build it? Well, they were a little bit concerned about kind of how they could get troops and materials up and down the coast of California just in case something happened. So they said, all right, we're going to build this bridge over the Albion River, and that's what they did. They built this bridge in a little bit under a year. Let me paint you a picture of this bridge. It stretches about 1,000 feet across the Albion River. Now, it stands kind of as a testament to wartime ingenuity. It's primarily made of timber with a steel truss in the middle that was actually salvaged from another bridge up north that was spanning the Feather River. They demoed that and they brought that piece down here for this bridge. And the whole thing, by and large, is supported by these concrete piers that are kind of sunk into the ground. It's been here for 80 years, and by the looks of it, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere soon unless CalTrans tears it down. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, at least to me. It was in 2006 when CalTrans looked at this bridge and they decided, you know what, we need to tear that down and replace it with something more modern. Now, there weren't any problems with the bridge. It was just that it took a lot of maintenance. You know, they had to kind of tighten everything up and treat bolts and replace any lumber that may have rotted out. It was kind of an ongoing thing, as a wooden bridge would be. Now, on the other side, you had the people who live in this area here on the coast of Northern California. And you got to kind of go back because this area is a bit counterculture. There were a lot of people who came to this area and they kind of wanted to get away. They were artists and back to the land people, and they were kind of bugging out of the city and coming up here because it was very rural at that time, and it was a really lovely place to be, and it's still a pretty lovely place to be. And on the one side, you have CalTrans, this agency whose role is to kind of build road things in California, and that's what they do. You know, it's an engineering-based kind of organization, and it's all about calculations. And on the other side, you have these people who live in this area who have an affinity for this bridge. They actually feel the bridge kind of adds to the character of the area. The bridge has soul, and they don't want to see it torn down. And so you have an argument between two sides. And I'm not really sure which side I'm going to come down on, but I'm going to share kind of the main points of the argument as I understand them. So I guess the biggest argument that CalTrans has, and they kind of have a point, that when you compare this bridge to a bridge that they could replace it with, well, the replacement bridge would be a much safer bridge. I mean, this thing was built 80 years ago, and in 80 years, we've gotten a lot better at kind of designing things that are pretty robust. There is concern about a tsunami, and there's a concern about an earthquake, and there's a concern about floods. I mean, CalTrans is looking at all of these worst case scenarios, and if those things happened and this bridge went down, it would take a long time to replace it, and this is a really valuable artery here. I am below Highway 1 in California, the Coast Highway. And this wooden bridge, if it was gone, it would be a big problem. Now, the counter argument by the people who support keeping this bridge is this bridge has been here for 80 years, and this bridge is still in really good shape. At least that's what they contend. And just because you can replace something doesn't mean that you necessarily should. And yeah, if the bridge was to be destroyed, it would be big disruption. But building a new bridge in this area would also be a major disruption, and the people in this area aren't sure they want to deal with that. Now, of course, maintenance is an issue. It's an old wooden bridge with a lot of steel in it and connectors, and those things need to be looked after. And CalTrans is saying, boy, if we had a newer bridge, we wouldn't have to do all of those things, and it would save us a lot of money. Well, the locals are like, yeah, but your current estimate on replacing this bridge, the high end is 85 million, which means by the time it's done, it's probably 100 million. So I don't know how many rounds of maintenance CalTrans would have to do to kind of equal the cost of a new bridge, but it would be a lot of rounds of maintenance. This one makes me laugh a little bit. Maybe it shouldn't, because CalTrans is saying this bridge is an environmental hazard. They're concerned that when they treat it with pesticides, it's going to get into the ground, and I suppose that's valid. They also talk about if the bridge does fail and all of this timber falls into the river, that's going to be a problem. Well, yeah, that would be a problem. I can definitely see that. And so the locals are looking at this and going, well, you want to build a bridge that's going to take over 5 years. You're going to have all of these people in this area working. The carbon footprint of a new bridge, like from the materials it needs and the transportation to get it here and the actual building and the supporting of all of those people, that carbon footprint is huge. So the locals are like, yeah, we get what you're saying on the environmental aspect, but we think building a new bridge would be way worse. So let's keep what we have. Now, CalTrans says by modern standards, this bridge is super narrow, and at 28.5 feet, it is pretty narrow. There's no kind of egress for pedestrians. There's no cyclist lane. It's like there's just enough room for vehicles and not much room for anything else. Well, the locals, they're not really arguing that it's not narrow. They're saying it's been here for a long time and we're used to it. And while a wider bridge would be better, when you kind of factor in all of the things that need to happen to put that wider bridge in place, well, they don't want any part of it. And then I suppose you get into some of the soft benefits of this bridge. And I wasn't sure how I would feel about the bridge until I got on site and I started photographing and being underneath it and seeing it. And I gotta say, this bridge has soul. It has a feeling that is very different than anything modern that they could build. And I know that's not really something that engineers want to hear. Well, maybe they do. Maybe I'm not giving the engineers enough credit. But there is kind of a beauty to this structure, and the way I feel when I'm below it and amongst it, it was really surprising to me. And I can understand why the people who live here in this area want to hold on to it. It kind of has an identity that helps give this area a sense of place. It's an anchor. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons this is such an emotional and kind of contentious fight. And as someone who grew up just south of this area and is an oldie, I can understand why people have an emotional attachment to this bridge. This area, I'm just south of Mendocino. This area used to be very rural and artists and back to land people. It was a groovy area, and it's changed. I mean, there's a lot more money up here. There's a lot more tourism, and what was once kind of out of the way and kind of calm is no longer that. And this bridge is a throwback to that time, and I can see why these people want to hold on to it. So honestly, when I decided to make this video, I really didn't have an opinion on whether this thing should stay or this thing should go. But the more that I think about this, the more time that I spend here beneath it, the more I think maybe we should keep these around and figure out how to make them safer and allow older infrastructure, when it makes sense, to remain in place. I know that newer is typically better, and we are in a hurry to get rid of old things and replace them with the new and improved model. But I had to ask myself, is that really the best course of action here? Is it really the best for this community to get rid of something like this, something that is loved and has meaning, and replace it with something that is more efficient and arguably safer, but doesn't really have soul? I don't think it is. So I would love to know what you guys think about this. Do you think this bridge should be kept in place and maintained and made as safe as it possibly could be made? Or do you think its time has passed? Let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think. You might have noticed down below the video window there's some t-shirts and sweatshirts and hats and things that you could purchase. Maybe you don't necessarily need a sweatshirt or a hat or a t-shirt, but it would support what I'm doing and I'd appreciate it.